John wiped the sweat from his brow as he looked down at the freshly dug grave. "Another one for you, Sylvia," he said, patting his trusty shovel. John had been a gravedigger for over 20 years now, and while others may have found the constant company of the dead unsettling, he was comfortable among these rows of tombstones. As the sun began to set over the cemetery, John gathered his tools and prepared to head home after another day's work. He always took a moment to wish the new residents a peaceful rest. "You enjoy your new home now, you hear?" he called down with a chuckle. As John turned to leave, a faint whisper stopped him in his tracks. "John," it seemed to call from the wind. He spun around looking for the source, but found only silence among the graves. With a shake of his head, John shrugged it off as his tired mind playing tricks, and continued on his way. The next morning, John arrived to find he had been assigned to dig up and relocate an old grave in the far corner of the cemetery. "No rest for the wicked, eh, Sylvia?" he joked as he read the worn-out tombstone. The name and date had long since faded away, leaving no clue who the occupant might be. As John's shovel bit into the earth, the wind picked up. He could have sworn it sounded like a voice saying, "Don't disturb her rest." Goosebumps prickled his arms, but he shook it off and kept digging. Several feet down, his shovel hit something hard. Clearing away the last of the dirt revealed a coffin decorated with strange symbols and a large metal lock shaped like a skull. "Well, aren't you fancy?" John murmured. He hauled it up and pried open the lid. Inside was a woman dressed in a long black gown, hands folded peacefully across her chest. Although clearly dead, her skin seemed almost lifelike, still full of color. "Hey, John, who's the sleeping beauty?" called out Mike, another gravedigger passing by. "Aw, don't be jealous. You'll find your own soon enough," John retorted with a laugh. Mike waved him off with a snort and went about his work. John finished reburying the ornate coffin a bit unsettled by the encounter. That night as he slept, vivid dreams came, filled with images of the dead woman. She seemed to call to him, beckoning him to join her in eternal rest. John woke in a cold sweat, heart racing. The next day, John couldn't get the coffin out of his head. He started researching the symbols, trying to learn more about its occupant. Buried in old texts, he discovered their connection to an obscure cult that had bizarre beliefs about manipulating life after death. The mysteries kept piling up around this woman. Who was she? Why did she seem to haunt his thoughts? Needing answers, John returned to the cemetery after hours. "All right, no more games," he called out sternly to the rows of tombstones. "Who are you?" The wind picked up again, this time carrying hushed voices. John froze as the whispers surrounded him. "She is the bridge, the conduit," they seemed to say. The whispers compelled John to the woman's new grave. Heart pounding, he opened the coffin lid once more. Suddenly, her eyes snapped open, green and wild. Her body jolted upright, ragged breaths filling her lungs. John fell backwards, paralyzed in fear and astonishment. Slowly, her breathing regulated, and she regarded John with curiosity. "What year is this?" she rasped. Taken aback, John stammered. 2023? She nodded thoughtfully. Seems I've been asleep for quite some time. Tell me, do people still ride around in those strange metal contraptions?" John hesitated before realizing she meant cars. Yes, but they aren't metal anymore, mostly plastic and fiberglass. We also have smartphones and electric lights." She cut him off with a laugh. "My, hasn't the world evolved?" John couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of debating cars with the undead. "My name is Alara," she offered. "I am, or was, a medium between worlds of the living and dead, but there are those who wish to exploit my gifts." Her expression darkened, and so I chose to sever my ties with the physical world, to protect the delicate balance between realms and stop those who would abuse the spirits. John's head spun, trying to make sense of it all. Before he could respond, footsteps sounded behind him. 3 figures approached, robed and solemn. "We have found her brothers. The conduit lives again," their leader proclaimed. John's blood turned to ice as he realized these must be the cult Alara had spoken of. The leader turned to John with a scowl. "You, Gravedigger, you will take us to her." John took a shaky step back. I don't know what you're talking about. The man cut him off, eyes flashing dangerously. Do not play games with us. Take us to the woman. Her gifts will serve our order once again. Before John could reply, a chill swept through the graveyard. The ground itself seemed to tremble as spirits rose up from the earth, called forth to protect their conduit. They encircled John and Ilara, shielding them from the cultists' sight. The leader bellowed in rage and began chanting an incantation, joined by the others. Dark, shadowy forms appeared to fight back against the spirits. Chaos erupted as the battle raged. Headstones were knocked over, graves upturned as the dead warred with darkness. From the fray emerged the ghost of an elderly man, shaking his fist. You hooligans better pick up my tombstone when you're done with this nonsense, he scolded. Despite everything, John couldn't help but snort. Some things didn't change, even in death. Ilara's face was grave as she observed the destruction. This battle cannot end, not until the last medium crosses over for good. She turned to John, eyes full of sadness and wisdom far beyond her physical years. My dear John, in you I have glimpsed a kindred spirit. We will meet again. With that, she stepped forward into the fray and unleashed a blast of brilliant light. It illuminated each dark corner with breathtaking intensity. John shielded his eyes against the blinding purge. When it finally faded, silence and stillness had returned to the cemetery. Ilara and the battling spirits had vanished, leaving only a few scattered leaves swirling through the air. John fell to his knees, overwhelmed with exhaustion. When the sun rose the next morning, he was still there, slumped against a tombstone. With unsteady hands, he picked up his shovel and began the day's work, now truly alone with the dead. But he took solace knowing that somewhere their souls were at peace thanks to one brave woman's sacrifice. And maybe, someday, he would see her again.